Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Prime Minister said yesterday that as a result of his deal, the UK would be safer, stronger and better off within Europe. He hasn't convinced all of his cabinet colleagues, or it suggested the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson. But of course, the most important people he has to win over are the millions of voters who will decide the outcome of this referendum. David Cameron is with me now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hot foot back from Brussels. You must be knackered.
Well, I had a decent night's sleep last night, and I think it was important work.
It was important. I want to go through some of the detail of the important work, but before we do, I thought I'd give you the chance. There's 2 million people watching, probably Boris Johnson as well. Can you tell them why they should be voting to stay in the EU, despite all the things they've heard against it?
Well, I want what's best for Britain, and I think what's best for Britain is staying in a reformed European Union, because we'll be better off safeguarding our position in this massive single free market that we have in Europe. I think we'll be stronger in the world, being able to get things done, whether that's making sure our country is safe and our people are safe. And I think we'll fight terrorism and criminality better. We'll be safer inside the EU because we're able to work with our partners, strength in numbers in a dangerous world. That, I think, is a positive choice, whereas I think a leap in the dark, with uncertainty already in our world, why take a further risk? You don't need to. We've now got a better deal.
Now, in terms of the details of the deal, you did promise before the election that no children of EU migrants would be getting benefits as a result of that. You haven't got that, have you?
Well, what we've achieved, which I think is a big achievement, is to say that for new arrivals, they will get child benefit, not at British rates, but at a rate that reflects the cost of living in their country. And for existing people here, over the next few years, we'll move to a system where they get that lower rate of child benefit too. Now, these are things that many people thought were impossible to achieve,
Sure.
not least your last guest on the programme, who argued for welfare restrictions, said they were very important, and now we've got them, seems to say they're irrelevant.
We'll come on to him later on, but I just want to establish for clarity, and in terms of being honest with people watching, what you wanted in the manifesto you haven't quite achieved on child benefit. Well, you said no children, however long people had worked, however long they've been here, not at all, and you haven't got that.
I'm very happy to look at the manifesto, what we promised, getting out of ever closer union. We got out of ever closer union.
Yep.
Making sure we treat...
Absolutely,
it's a negotiation, but you can see in each case what I asked for and what we got. And we got many things that people said were simply not achievable. Nigel Farage and others said, you'll never get Britain out of ever closer union. And we have. And what this means is the best of both worlds.
I'll come back to that too.
Because we're out of the things we don't want to be in, the euro, we're out of the no borders agreement, we're now out of ever closer union, but we keep the full access and the say over the single market and the political cooperation to keep our people in our country safe.
But just sticking with benefits, the same is true. We didn't get what we wanted on child benefit or on the overall benefit package for EU migrants coming in, because it was going to be 4 years of nothing, and now it's 4 years of a tapered increasing benefit.
Well, that's right. What we said we wanted is you shouldn't get something for nothing. You have to pay into our system before you get out of it, and you won't get full access to our in-work benefit system for 4 years. And what I think I've achieved that is, I think, even more strong than that, is that this mechanism is going to last for 7 years. So let's say we get it in place in 2017. It'll still be operating in 2024, and people won't be getting full benefits till 2028. Now,
but they will be getting some. They will be getting some. I mean, if I'm imagine me as a Hungarian arriving in this country. How long do I have to work here before I get any benefits at all?
Well, if you come here, even in 2024, you're not going to get full access to our in-work benefit system till 2028.
Sure, you say full. I'm asking, how long is it before I get anything?
Well, what we've set out is that you get nothing to start with, and you don't get full access till after 4 years. And now we have to settle the details and put all that in place, which we will.
So we don't know, actually.
Well, what we know is you get no benefits to start with, and you don't get full access for 4 years. No more something for nothing. Everyone has to pay in before they get out. Again, I think something people said we wouldn't achieve and actually something that has been achieved.
So far as you're aware now, after 6 months, I could get 90% of benefits.
Well, no, it's going to be phased in over 4 years. So
but
you
we don't know
get
how the phase works.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to settle all that later. But it's a very important move because people want a country where there is no something for nothing. You don't come here, immediately claim benefits. You have to pay in first. And I think this is important.
The benefits deal is now very, very complicated because we're going to be paying proportion of benefits paid in 27 different countries at different rates at different times. For a Work and Pensions Department, which has struggled to introduce universal credit for 6 years, is this actually plausible?
Yes, it's absolutely doable. It's not a difficult calculation. You just have to work out the relative cost of living in different countries, and therefore you pay that level of child benefit. But it does raise, I think...
Ian Duncan Smith agrees with this, does he?
Look, all of this is deliverable, otherwise I wouldn't have agreed to it, and it, I think, meets what we set out in our manifesto, the commitments that we made. But I would make this point, because it was interesting listening to Nigel Farage. If we were to leave the EU, and we were to try and insist on full access to the single market, like Norway has, for instance, every other country that's got that sort of deal has had to accept the free movement of people and a contribution to the EU budget.
He says that is simply not true.
I'll come on to that. But so it would be ironic, actually, if we left the EU, negotiated our way back into full access for the single market, and then wouldn't be able to exercise these welfare restrictions that I've just negotiated. Now, what Nigel Farage was saying, and this is important, of course, there is the option of having a trade deal with the EU, but you can look at all of the trade deals, they do not cover every industry. And this is crucial.
Canada's done quite a good one.
It hasn't been finished. It's been going for 7 years, and I think this goes to the heart of the argument. If we remain in a reformed EU, you know what you're going to get. You know how to do business. You know how to create jobs. You know how to continue with our economic recovery. If we leave, 7 years potentially of uncertainty, and at the end of that process you still can't be certain that our businesses will have full access to the market. So it could cost jobs, it could mean businesses, overseas businesses not investing in Britain. It would be a step into the dark, a real risk and uncertainty, and that's just the last thing we need in our country right now.
When it comes to an awful lot of people on the other side of the argument, the fundamental question is sovereignty. Can you look me in the eye or look the camera in the eye and say, as a result of this negotiation, Britain has control over her own laws?
Well, absolutely. That what we've got now is getting out of ever closer union. So actually, we're now best of both worlds. We are. I'll come on to this sovereignty question because it's so important.
It really is.
You know, we're going to be in the single market, in the political cooperation to keep our world and our people safe, but out of the projects that we don't like, out of the euro, out of the no borders agreement. Now, on sovereignty, yes, of course. If Britain were to leave the EU, that might give you a feeling of sovereignty, but you've got to ask yourself, is it real? Would you have the power to help businesses and make sure they weren't discriminated against in Europe? No, you wouldn't. Would you have the power to insist that European countries share with us their border information so we know what terrorists and criminals are doing in Europe? No, you wouldn't. If suddenly a ban was put on for some bogus health reasons on one of our industries, would you be able to insist that that ban was unpicked? No, you wouldn't. So you have an illusion of sovereignty, but you don't have power. You don't have control. You can't get things done. And to me, this is in a way quite simple. You boil it down to, if you love this country, and I love this country so much, you want what's best for it, and you want to make sure we are stronger, we're safer, we're better off, we're able to get things done in the world. That's what this is about. That's really the question we have to answer.
Isn't the big truth about this that the old EU, with its treaties, the Lisbon Treaty and the Nice Treaty and all the rest of them, overhanging our laws, and its over-centralised, massive, blundering machine, imperial in its ambitions, carries on? And because we are still under those treaties, we carry on under it.
Well, the difference is that, of course, now we're not only out of the euro, out of the no borders agreement, but we're also out of ever closer union. So we won't be part of it. Yes.
Because this depends upon a treaty of undefined scope at an undefined time with new leaders we don't even know about. So it's taken on trust.
Hold on. First of all, what was agreed by 28 prime ministers and presidents, every EU country, on Friday evening, that is in itself an international law decision, a treaty that will be deposited at the UN. It is legally binding, it is irreversible. The only way it can be reversed is if all 28 countries, including me, were to turn around and say we don't want this anymore. So that's not going to happen.
This is exactly what John Major said in 1992 when the Danes got their legally binding and irreversible agreement, which was then destroyed and shredded.
23, the Danish had a protocol to give them some special status in the EU. 23 years on, that special status continues. So we have got, it's survived. Not only have 28 countries made this legally binding decision, but we also have, in two vital areas, the commitment to treaty change to carve Britain out of ever closer union. So we're in the bits of Europe we want to be in, but out of those we don't want to be in. And crucially, and this is a more technical issue, but there's a simplicity, it's hard, treaty change to make sure that not only can we keep our currency, the pound, forever, but also the pound and our businesses cannot be discriminated against in Europe. And I think this is a really important point, because to me, the weakness of the Leave campaign is I think they forget that even if you leave, the EU still exists. It's still on your doorstep.
I want to come
and what I will
Absolutely.
have with this deal is to make sure we can never be discriminated against. Leave the EU and your businesses can be discriminated against, your financial services can be discriminated against, and there's not much you can do about that.
But meanwhile, we are under supreme EU law. And that was the point that Michael Gove. Now, I know he's a friend of yours and you must have been disappointed by his decision, but I think you'd also agree he has put things very, very clearly with characteristic crispness. And so I'm going to read some of them to you and see how you respond. He says that our membership of the EU prevents us being able to change huge swathes of law and stops us being able to choose who makes critical decisions which affect all our lives. Laws which govern citizens in this country are decided by politicians from other nations who we never elected and can't throw out. He's absolutely right, isn't he?
Well, first of all, on this sovereignty issue, I mean, we should stand back for a moment and recognise this referendum. This is an enormous act of British sovereignty. This is Britain and British people saying, let's make a choice here. Second point I'd make is, look, sovereignty really means, are you able to get things done? Are you able to change things, to fix things? And as I say, you might feel more sovereign.
Which law is supreme?
You might feel more sovereign, but if you can't get your businesses access to European markets, if you can't keep your people safe, if you can't insist on the passenger information, the terrorist information that we need, then you are not actually more in charge of your destiny. You're less in charge of your destiny. And there is, of course, this crucial point that if you leave the EU and then want full access, unimpeded access to that single market, the other countries have got that, have had to sign up to all the rules of the EU without having a say. So, I mean, take one in...
After your negotiation in Brussels, you suggested that you were going to introduce some new mechanism or law in this country to enhance sovereignty. Are you?
Yes, we're going to set out in the coming days proposals, as I've announced, I think, before on this programme, to make clear that, the British Parliament is sovereign. We have chosen to join the EU. We could choose to leave the EU, and I think there's some important work to put that point on that.
Does it actually matter? So long as we are under the treaties, there is no law that this Parliament can pass which gets us out of those treaties. We can't declare UDI from those treaties.
No, what you can do, though, is just put beyond doubt in people's minds, because sometimes this is questioned.
It's PR, isn't it, really?
No, I think it's not. I think for a lot of people it's important. As I say, this is an act of sovereignty, holding the referendum. But I think it's important for people to know that in the end, what our Parliament does, our Parliament can undo. It is a sovereign Parliament. Look, I approach all these issues in a very simple way. I am passionate and love the institutions and the constitution we have in our country. I do not love the institutions of Brussels, but I make a clear-eyed determination of what will make Britain stronger, what will make us safer, what will enable us to protect our people in this world, and it's to get the best of both worlds in this amended EU.
Is it possible to give more powers to our Supreme Court to somehow keep back the ever-encroaching world of the European Court of Justice, which, as Michael Gove again says, ministers sit there and they see all this slew of legislation and change law coming across their desks, and they're told they can't do anything about it.
There is this argument, which our proposals will address, that countries that have written constitutions have sometimes been able not only to assert the sovereignty of their own parliament, as we've just discussed, but actually to go further and say that those constitutional principles have to be taken into account. But we'll be making this clear. I know you're trying to get me to pre-announce this on your programme. You're going to have to wait.
I'm going to ask you one easy to answer, straightforward, open question about this. Are you suggesting that we need a written constitution in this country?
I'm not making that argument. I think we shouldn't have to do that in order to give to ourselves what some other countries have managed
Because that would be a
inside
massive
the
change,
EU. No, I don't think that's necessary. But you'll have to wait for the detailed proposals. But I think they're important.